Hey everyone, welcome to episode 86 of the So This Is My Why podcast. I'm your host and producer, Lingya, and hello from sunny London. If you're listening to this episode, it's probably because you're either really interested in the world of NFTs Web3, or at the very least are intrigued by what all the buzz is about, particularly with the recent NFT NYC that's been flooding Twitter. Well, if you are, do I have a treat for you, because today's guest is Zeneca, or Roy, one of the most prolific NFT thought leaders out there with almost 300,000 Twitter followers. And he's also the founder of his own NFT project called Zen Academy, has a YouTube channel, newsletter, and not one, but two podcasts. So who exactly is Zeneca? Well, he was a professional poker player for 15 years, and that experience allowed him to think of money in a very interesting way, a thinking that's proven to be really helpful as he's entered into NFTs. He owns Cryptopunks, Bored Apes, generative art from the likes of Artblock, 60 goblins from Goblintown. And thanks to his wide-ranging NFT investments, his net worth has 100x'd in 1 year. So how did he do it? What is it like, really, being a part of the Cryptopunks and Bored Ape community? What would it take, according to Zeneca, for Bored Apes to completely lose its value and drop to zero? And why is he so bullish on generative art? We cover all that and more in part 1 of 2 of this interview with Zeneca. Do stick around. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. So please do leave a rating and review on the podcast platform you're listening to this on. To leave a review, you can follow the link that's also left in the description for this podcast episode. Every review does allow more people to find this show and allow the podcast to grow. Now, are you ready? Let's go.
So I've always loved games, playing chess when I was 3 or 4. We played a lot of cards growing up, and my grandma's a big card player. So whenever we'd visit, my parents are from India, whenever we'd go back to India to stay with her, it was just always playing cards. And I mean, it still is. Even now, if we go back and play cards, we play rummy. So yeah, just always loved games, board games, video games, card games. And so I knew how to play poker a little bit, but I never properly played. And then when I was, I think 16 or 17, so it was my last or second last year of high school, poker at this time in 2004, 2005 was starting to blow up. It was really popularized because it was shown on ESPN. They were showing it on TV, really making it almost quote unquote sport out of it. It's televised activity that people were making it entertainment, I guess. And so, it was blowing up everywhere. I was at a friend's house on the weekend. We were playing Halo. There's 4 or 8 of us playing Halo as a video game. And then during the break, we ordered some pizza and turned the TV on, and poker was on. I had never really seen it like that. But one of my friends, Glenn, still remember him. He knew what it was, and he sort of told us about the rules and how it was played, and just sort of immediately fascinated me because obviously I like games and stuff. So yeah, from there, I went online. I tried to find out material and learn and play poker and be better at poker, and I ordered a bunch of books and just sort of went down the rabbit hole basically. And I was playing with my friends, and I started playing online a little bit just for free play money, not really any real money, especially, I mean, it was difficult at, I guess, 16, 17 to even deposit money online. And then eventually I did deposit, I think, $50 and was able to make money from it and just kept doing that, I guess.
You eventually go pro.
Yeah.
It must have been an interesting conversation with your parents as well.
Yeah, it wasn't a specific, hey, I'm going to be a professional poker player. I finished high school and then went to university, and I was studying commerce with a view to do law. But at the same time, last few months of high school, and certainly as I started getting into the first few months of university, I was really playing a lot of poker, making pretty decent money at this point. $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month, which, as an 18-year-old kid, that's a lot of money. So I was just not paying as much attention to university and not enjoying it. I would go to my classes with my laptop, play online poker. I would travel a bit and just really was enjoying life. At that point in my mind, I was pretty sure I just wanted to sort of go pro, and that's all I wanted to do. But I sort of framed it to my parents, I'm going to take 6 months off and I want to go travel. Then I'll probably come back. So after the 6 months, I went back for about 45 minutes. I went back, I had my first class, and I think it was an accounting class, and they were sort of teaching us how to use Microsoft Excel. 40 minutes, and I was just bored and not interested. And again, poker was still going well. So I decided to, at that point, really just drop out and focus on poker. And that lasted about 15 years, basically.
Did you think at that point when you dropped out, I'm going to do poker for a bit and I'm going to hit this particular goal? Or was it just, I like poker, I don't like counting, I'm just going to go with the flow?
Yeah, it was more go with the flow. I think in my mind, I had like dreams and aspirations to just play poker, make a ton of money, and then retire and not have to do anything else. And I think if I were smarter, more disciplined, wiser with my money, and more frugal and all that kind of stuff, maybe I could have done and set myself up a lot more favorably. But it was really go with the flow. This is fun. This is relatively easy compared to other options. And I was enjoying life. So then I just said, let me just see where this goes.
I imagine as a professional poker player, and as you said, you've played for 15 years, you see money in a very different way from how most people would. I mean, when people get money, the spending of the money is very emotional. But I imagine you can't possibly do that as a poker player, let alone a successful one. And you once said that you see money as a tool. So what is that mindset that poker has given you?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Most jobs you go to, you don't work 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, work for a month or two and lose money. Like that's just usually never an option. You can be unemployed and not making money. You can get a pay cut, but it's very different. You don't go to work and then work for all day and then come out with way less money than you started with. So I think that's different when it comes to poker and trading. You can very much realistically lose money, even though you're working, playing well, doing all the right things, quote unquote. So you need what I sort of call a healthy disassociation to money. When you're sitting down at a poker table, for instance, and you're trying to decide whether to call a bet or raise, go all in, fold, if you're looking at the chips as what the utility of that money would do in real life, like if you say, well, if I call this and win a big pot, well, maybe that's a holiday, or maybe this is a car, or if I lose, that's 2 weeks rent, or this could be a nice meal, or this is a movie. If you're just constantly thinking about what that money can get you, drive yourself crazy, your emotions are too intertwined, you're usually not going to be able to think logically and make the best decision because you're thinking about like the emotions of it. So finding a way to detach yourself from that and view money as a tool, as like chips, as numbers, and not sort of the utility of what that money can do is important for, I think, staying sane and not just having your emotions affect your decisions too much. And I think that's something that's really necessary in poker and then in NFTs, crypto, Web3 trading, investing in general, really important.
This mindset, did it take you a while to get it? Is it possible for someone to not play poker, but still develop that sort of mindset? I imagine the basic way would be to put and use money that is not your entire net worth. It's money that you expect to never see again. Is that a healthy way?
Yes, that's healthy. That's actually exactly what I was about to talk about. It fell out of my head, but I was going to talk about like bankroll management and separating sort of a bankroll that you use to play poker with or invest in crypto and NFTs and your real life funds and money. One of the most important and first steps to take, I think, is setting aside rent money. 6 months of living costs, 12 months of living costs, and having a separate bankroll and basket of funds to use to play poker with or invest with and trade with and gamble with, basically, because it is high risk. So that if that fluctuates, you know that you have a separate allocation of funds to put a roof over your head, put food in your mouth, and all that kind of stuff. So I think that, yeah, it is really, really important to have a bankroll and have a delineation between living costs and investing or gambling or poker costs. Is it possible to sort of have that relationship with money without poker or NFTs? Probably, but I don't think that many people would. And I'm not even sure it's beneficial to have that. If you're not trading or if you're not investing in anything high risk or playing poker or taking high risks, it's probably better to take, I guess, money more seriously and to not be as flippant with it as maybe a poker player or an investor might be. Like, certainly that there are poker players who are better at, I guess, being frugal and using money more wisely. But for me, it's difficult, I guess, just like going out for a meal or like ordering delivery or taking an Uber somewhere instead of walking or public transport. For me, it's like, all right, that to me is an acceptable expense. And that's like, okay, so money, it can save me a bit of time. Whereas it might make sense to like save that money and put it into investments and like compound interest and really just be a little more savvy with finances in terms of like setting yourself up and security and long-term stuff. It probably makes sense to be that way, but I found it difficult. It gets back to that healthy disassociation of money concept, whereas like on the one hand, you don't want to respect money so much that you afraid to like bet or gamble with it or trade with it, but you don't want to respect it like nothing either, because then you treat it like water and you just make bad decisions because money is meaningless. So it's finding that middle ground. I'm somewhere on the spectrum. And I think for me personally, I found a good space. I guess everyone in life is somewhere on that spectrum. Like some people just don't care and they'll rack up tons of credit card debt and all that kind of stuff. And then other people just save every penny. And
Do you have any idea of what success looked like? Was it, oh, I want to make X amount of money? Because if you're in a traditional white collar job, you know where you're going. But for poker game, I don't think so. It's different.
Yeah, it is different. I had various goals over the years. There's various different metrics. One of them is just sort of like the games that you play in terms of like the stakes. There's small stakes, medium stakes, high stakes, very high stakes, which have different buy-ins and blinds and amounts of money that you need to play realistically. The goal was largely just move up in stakes and be able to play higher stakes and do so while having a bankroll that is like adequate and comfortable. So I would say, and I never had a extremely specific goal saying, I want to play these stakes, I want to have this much money, but it was just generally just moving up and progressing through the ranks in that sort of way.
So you were in the space, no stranger to the online world. And I learned that you first dabbled in crypto in 2016, 17. How did that first happen?
It was pretty much because of poker or like just talking to people in the poker space. A lot of poker players, I think, were fairly early to crypto. I remember back in 2010, 2011, 2009, very, very early when Bitcoin was first a thing and people were talking about it. There was, or there still is, this very popular online poker forum called 2+2, where basically everyone would hang out and talk about obviously poker, but then off-topic things, investing, and anything under the sun. And there was, a thread on Bitcoin. Actually, there was a poker site that people would play in Bitcoin as well. I think it was called Seals with Cubs or Clubs way back in the day. I don't believe I ever played there. So I was aware of Bitcoin, but I never really did anything with it until 2016, 2017. Just then Bitcoin, Ethereum was around. Crypto was like more commonly known. People were talking about it more. It was more in the zeitgeist. And so I was playing more live poker. Prior to that, most of my poker was online, save for a couple of tournaments here and there. Online poker laws changed in Australia where I was living. Basically, poker companies could no longer offer their games to Australians. So I had to look for alternatives. And that's where I went to play more and more in person. And just around the poker table, people started talking about crypto and online chatting in group chats with poker friends and stuff. It just became more of a conversation. And so I looked into it and it started to interest me like a bit. It appealed to me from the perspective of obviously you can make money and numbers going up and people are talking about it. It sounded cool, especially Ethereum, things like smart contracts and dApps and all of these concepts that when I read like an article or something about it, I was like, this sounds really, really cool. But I wasn't tech savvy enough or forward thinking enough to really conceptualize the use cases. I was like, this sounds really, really cool. That's the end of it. And so I had a bit of conviction. It's like, I like it and I trust it because all these smart people seem to like it and trust it. But I didn't really have that conviction myself. So I dabbled a bit. I bought some coins as I would take some of my poker winnings and buy some Ethereum and dabble with some altcoins and no real idea of what I was doing. I made a bunch of money because it was impossible not to if you got in like before that bull run. But for the most part, I kept it in crypto. So then it came crashing down. It was almost like, all right, that was fun. That was a good experiment, whatever. Let's go back to real life, back to poker because I didn't have that conviction or understanding in the space that the builders and the people who stuck around for years and years and really laid the foundation for what is all around us now had. So yeah, 2016, 2017 got into crypto and really from, I guess, 2017 all the way to late 2020, early 2021, I was pretty much out of it, save for the fact that there was one online site I played in Bitcoin towards the end. But basically all I would do was withdraw the Bitcoin back to Australian dollars. And so like I didn't trade in any other coins. I didn't really care about following Bitcoin's price too much other than when it went up, I was making a little bit more money.
What changed at the end of 2020, 2021?
Well, yeah. So obviously numbers started going up a lot and that just sort of made me more interested, especially going into early 2021. I still had some coins. And so I was like, oh, let me go check on these coins that I thought were basically worthless. I kept about, I think 25 ETH. I guess in the back of my mind, I always sort of had this inkling that ETH is going to come back. I was more bullish on ETH and Bitcoin back in 2016, 2017 and anything else. While I didn't really take profits when ETH hit all-time highs back then, I didn't really panic or like sell when it hit $500, $200. And it was sort of like, well, yeah, okay, I'm just going to hold and see what happens. When all that started happening, I was like, okay, so now there's real money here. I need to figure out what I want to do with it. Do I hold? Do I sell? And I think for a reasonable part, for a lot of the altcoins that I had very little understanding or conviction of that I thought were written off, I started selling off bits and pieces there just to take profit. But that's sort of when I started thinking about crypto more again, because I had some assets to manage. Prices were going up. More and more people were talking about it, obviously. And it was in mid-February that I had my friend Jamie, who I've known for 15 years, my best friend, and we've been through poker and everything. We now have our own podcast. He asked me if I knew what a hash mark was. So obviously referring to hash masks, an NFT project that launched them, but he said hash mark. I had no idea what he was talking about. He didn't really know what he was talking about. I said no, I'd never heard of it. Sort of like dropped that for a week or so. And then he started mentioning NFTs a little bit to me again over the course of a couple of weeks because he had some friends that had sort of stayed in crypto for the last 4 years, and they were into NFTs and talking to him about it. And I think for the most part, we did not get it. We thought it was a scam. It was a cult. It just didn't make sense. And these other friends of his were just like burning money, basically. It's not an uncommon thing for poker players to get into something totally crazy and ridiculous and burn money. But on the flip side, it's also not uncommon for them to be at the forefront of something brand new and big and make tons of money. So I think eventually both he and I realized we should maybe take it a little more seriously and dig deeper. And he found a really turning point, basically an article written by Packy McCormick called Power to the Person. And it was all about the creator economy and what NFTs can do and why they might be value and why they might be value in the punks and these early NFTs. And so he read that and he told me that I needed to read it. So I read that. And that's sort of when the shift started to happen in my mind, where I was like, okay, maybe it's not totally a scam. Maybe there's something here. There's something powerful here. There's something different here.
What was it about that article that you could describe it as everything clicked for you? What was it that clicked?
I think it's been a long time since I've read it, but if I'm remembering correctly, there were two key concepts that I really took away. One being that with NFTs, we're really moving into this digital age of ownership where it's almost like a new asset class being created with, let's say, art or even collectibles, art and Cryptopunks. And it was sort of like, well, imagine being able to go back 1,000 years, 2,000 years and buy like the earliest pieces of art or like of a genre or something in that ilk. And so realizing that the technology was run on the Ethereum blockchain, and the Ethereum blockchain is, or whatever blockchain, but focused on Ethereum, likely to be around. And, you know, they've been building and it's now this well-established thing. And there's a lot of cool things you can do with it. You can verify ownership, and provenance was a huge thing that obviously there's value there. So that was one thing where I was like, oh, okay, maybe there's a lot of value, or that there will be in the future, I have no idea when, to own or to have exposure to these really early assets. But the other thing I think, which was even more fundamental to the shift in my mindset, was in the title of the article, the whole creator economy aspect, where all of a sudden now anyone from around the world could create anything, whether it's art, whether it's music, whether it's this, that, or the other, and sell it as a digital asset, as an NFT to anyone in the world. And creators could connect with fans, collectors, and sort of bridge that gap and reward creators more, while at the same time, like eliminating the middle person. You know, that's one of the best key things about crypto, right? You get rid of these intermediaries and middle people, and reducing fees and costs. And it's a shame for the industries that have been taking a cut of everything just to provide these services. But if we can conduct transactions in a permissionless, trustless manner, where we don't have to trust a third party, we can trust code is law and technology, then yeah, it's just a huge win. So really understanding those few things and how it could and has unlocked all this potential around the world, and talent really as well, understanding that there's so much talent out there in the world that for many reasons, because people are focused on putting food in their mouth and a roof over their head, are unable to spend time creating art because no one's going to find or buy their art if they don't live somewhere where art is a big industry or there are no buyers. All of a sudden now, maybe if they can sell online, then we can just unlock talent. It's a great article. Everyone should read it.
Yes, I'll link it in the show notes as well. So you discovered and understood the potential behind the technology of NFTs. What was your next step? Purchasing one?
Yeah, so honestly, the next step was I wanted a punk, because in that article they talk about punks, and then very quickly saw the price of them and it's like, okay, I could spend basically all the crypto I had. I don't even know if I had enough ETH at the time. It's like I could put everything into a punk, but I didn't, like, A, that's really risky putting into one single thing, and B, I still didn't really understand, like, all right, this is really smart. Okay, I get that all my smart friends and really smart people now believe in crypto and NFTs. So it's probably a smart thing to get into it. But because I didn't yet have that really strong conviction myself, it would have been very difficult to sort of go all in on a punk. But there was the punks token, an ERC20 token, that basically I think using NFTX or one of those pools where people basically fractionalized or like tokenized punks, it was possible to buy, say, 3% of a punk or have exposure to 3% of punk. And that was basically the next step. Jamie and I together, Jamie was talking about wanting to do that. And I said, okay, I'm interested in this. I have a little bit of ETH. How might I go about it? And the next step's really funny because I think he actually sent a screenshot from, one of his friends who'd been in the space for a while. And it was like, all right, so we want to buy some punks tokens. How do we do it? And this friend said, oh, it's really easy. Here's Sushi Swap. Just go to this site, get some ETH into MetaMask, and then connect, find the token pool, wrap some ETH. And I didn't know what MetaMask was. I didn't know what SushiSwap was. I didn't know what wrapped ETH was. I didn't know what any of this was. And it's just like, I think about this often because I think for those of us who have been in the space for 6 months, a year, we sort of take for granted some of these things and how common it is. But then when you think about someone new to the space, just these terms, it's just so foreign and different to our way of thinking that, yeah, I was just like, all right, so I'm going to need hand holding. And then honestly, it was a lot of asking questions, a lot of doing research myself, and a lot of fear as well, because when you're sending money to MetaMask or signing a transaction and paying gas, it's real money. And if you make a mistake, there's no taking it back as well. So I think the next month or so was just really just figuring out basic terms. And I remember I literally sat down one day, a month or so after really having that mind shift change. I made like a conscious decision. All right, I really want to focus on learning and understanding this more, because it does seem real and there's a lot of opportunity here. So I sat down one day and I just wrote down a list of just different phrases that I'd heard but had no real understanding of, and just wanted to know better. And there were things like layer twos, liquidity pools, a sushi swap, so many different things. And I just started going through them one by one and trying to figure out what they all were. Actually, I should try and find if I have that list somewhere, because that'd be fascinating to go back and see. Yeah.
Yeah. And it would probably be very helpful for you when you're doing your own education as well. Since you also recently sent out a tweet. What was it that you wish you had learned when you first entered the space as well?
Yeah. Yeah.
When you first started learning, were there particular sources that you used that you found very helpful, that people who are listening to this now, and they are also facing the exact same dilemma as you, would you think would really benefit from?
Yes, I honestly, probably the single best source for my learning about crypto in general back then was this YouTube channel, Finematics, just run by this amazing educator who would spend 10 to 20 minutes each video going over one concept and really distilling it in an easy to understand way. And I would watch those again and again and again, because just watching it once is usually not enough to understand something like liquidity pools and farming yields and all that. But yeah, I really went back to those a lot. And actually, when I first started Zen Academy, which we'll get to later, I had the idea of creating videos in the same fashion. So it's sort of like that whiteboard style where he's talking and there's animations being drawn.
It's a huge YouTube channel right now, and it's very helpful. Even for me as well, when I discovered it was such a goldmine.
Yeah, it's so good. So yeah, that more than anything. And then obviously talking to friends and asking questions and just regular Googling and stuff. But nothing I think was as helpful at that time than the Finematics channel.
Were you not afraid, because there is all these words of scams and people trying to do rug pulls? Were you not worried that you might be talking to people who might have intentions that were not aligned with yours?
I was really, really lucky, not because I sort of knew the people that I was talking with. So Jamie, obviously, we were sort of chatting back and forth, just learning together. And then we had a group chat that we created with some of his friends then. Now, I would consider them my friends now as well, that, we'd known for years and years through poker and trusted with, our lives basically, and tons and tons of money, and knew that they were good people and trying to help us, and they were offering their experience, and like we have questions and they would usually answer. And I think I was still naive back then. I didn't really realize how many scams and rug pulls and just how prevalent that was in the space. To me, the biggest risks were not interacting with a malicious website or a scam website. It was a user error. I was like, well, interacting with legitimate websites but doing the wrong thing. And I certainly wasted a good amount of money just doing the wrong thing, signing transactions to approve tokens and stuff like that were unnecessary and just wasted gas.
Speaking of wasted money, I found this tweet you sent on 15th March 2022, and you said, a year ago, you bought your first NFT and you described it as infinite regret.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
So my first NFT was so out of the same group chat, which I've just been praising, there was a conversation about NFT projects would come up occasionally. And at this point, there were very few that were open for minting. And it was very difficult to find an NFT that you could mint by and large. For me, it was OpenSea, where obviously everything was secondary. And I loved the idea of maybe getting it on mint. I was like, oh, I missed Cryptopunks. I missed hash masks. I missed Avatars. I missed all the projects, Zedron. And so in the group chat, it wasn't even directed at me, that I was just listening to like fly on the wall this conversation, and they were talking about this NFT project that they had minted, and I just sort of basically FOMO'd in. I followed the link, went to the website and minted a couple, and it just was clearly not going to be successful. It was almost a meme project back before meme projects were a thing. And yeah, I definitely had a lot of regret for a while after that, and I learned a valuable lesson to not just FOMO in because people are talking about it. But, now it's just fun looking back.
I love that you talked about the word FOMO, because that's probably the first thing that you hear when you try to get into the NFT space. And it reminds me of a tweet I saw recently that someone sent to you about how they saw a tweet you sent about this particular project and they didn't do any research. They jumped into it and they bought it. And I'm sure FOMO drove it as well. How do you think about FOMO? Because it's inevitable, but at the same time, you need to manage it as well.
Yeah, it's really tricky. I think obviously it's everywhere in this space because of how quick the space moves and how quickly people are able to 2x, 5x, 10x, 100x their money with just the right mint. And it sort of makes people feel as though any mint could be that mint or any purchase could be the purchase. So if they see people buying one, I think the mindset is, should I also be buying this? Is this going to go to the moon? I don't want to miss out. I have that fear of missing out on this profit, basically, which is where it comes from. So it's certainly a problem because obviously most projects are not going to perform exceptionally well. Most projects are going to go to zero. And that's even legitimate projects, let alone the malicious projects, the rug pulls, the scams that you mint and then the team disappears and the money disappears. And if you FOMO into those, it's even worse than when FOMO into something a little more legitimate. So yeah, it's prevalent. And I think it requires a level of like almost constant vigilance to sort of recognize when it's happening and identify that it's happening. That's the first point. And then maybe take a step back, take a breather and reevaluate your decisions. And so FOMO creates all these emotions and you want to trade and buy or even sell based on emotions and try to separate that and think logically through the situation. And in many instances, I would say FOMO can be a good thing because it's almost like if everyone is talking about a project and you feel a bit of FOMO, maybe it's because the project is legitimate. It's fantastic. You just hadn't heard about it and you need to be paying attention to it. I always say, I go back to the example, I have 3 Bored Apes. I bought them all after mint on secondary, about a month after. People ask me, why did I buy? It was FOMO. It was 100% FOMO. Now, if you were on Twitter in the crypto and NFT space, especially the NFT space in May 2021, everything was Bored Apes. Everyone was talking about it. And to begin with, it was a little annoying to me because like I didn't quite get it. I had previously bought a different ape project that hadn't taken off. And so I was a little bit salty and I was like, well, why is this one better than my one? And all
It was
that
the
kind of
ape
stuff.
only NFT, right?
Ape only. Yeah. Which is amazing. I thought it still is. I like the art. A much lower supply, 999. You could burn the NFT for a physical metal print of it, which even today, that's really cool utility. And then, yeah, so Bored Apes came along. I missed the mint. They were going slightly crazy, but not totally crazy. And I just didn't quite get it. And so I sort of ignored it and was stubborn. But then at a certain point, it just became unignorable. Everyone was talking about it. I was like, okay, I have FOMO. I want to be a part of it. But I certainly felt that, I remember consciously thinking, well, it's not just FOMO. Like if everyone is talking about this project, there might be something to it. And there were all these derivatives being created and it just seemed fun as well. It's just like the community is vibing and passionate and on Twitter everywhere. And yeah, I just wanted to be a part of it. So that's an instance where FOMO obviously went well and treated me well. But I mean, there's plenty of instances where it's not had a good result.
Do you also jump into their Discord to do some research and analyze whether this was a community you wanted to be in?
I actually can't remember if I joined the Discord before buying or not. Certainly afterwards. So I bought the 3, but they weren't like all one after the other. I think it was within the space of a couple of days. So certainly after buying the first one, I would have jumped into the server and spent some time hanging out. But I think for me, I sort of engaged with the community more on Twitter than in the Discord server. But yeah, I mean, it seemed really positive to me just based on how the community was engaging with one another back then.
Before we jump deep into the Bored Apes world, I wanted to ask, since you have clearly benefited from FOMO and you understand it, but you've also been in that space for a long time, you've seen the drawbacks as well. Would there ever be a project in the future where you would jump into it without any research, but because you felt that there was a potential and you didn't have time to do the research?
Yeah, I mean, all the time. I still do it. I still do it sometimes because I just don't have the time sometimes. But again, it all comes down as long as you're conscious and aware of what you're doing. So if I'm FOMOing in or buying into a project, minting in without doing a lot of research, I understand that it's high risk and that I might be minting a rug pull and there's some percentage chance to go to zero, but I think that asymmetrical bet. So it's sort of like if you mint something for 0.05, for example, or 0.1, and what's the worst that could happen? Well, it goes to zero. Okay, that's kind of bad. But then you think like, what's the best that could happen? Well, what if it goes to 1 ETH, 2 ETH, 5 ETH, 10 ETH? The upside is, uncapped, whereas the downside is capped. And obviously, most projects are not going to mint at 0.1 and go to 1 ETH and et cetera, et cetera. And it's a lot more complicated because some percentage of the time it drops 50%, 30%. Sometimes when it goes up, it only goes up a little bit. And then there's tax and then there's royalties and fees and other things. So there's a whole mess of it. But just the crux of it is, what's the worst that could happen? It goes to zero. Okay, am I okay losing this amount of money? Am I only FOMOing with funds that I am comfortable losing? I have in this high risk bankroll allocation, basically. And if the answer is yes, then I FOMO in or I mint without a lot of research and usually try and do that research later. There's a fun saying that goes around, which is when the market is bullish, that's when people mint first and research later. And then when it's bearish, that's the other way around.
I feel as though you must surely have some kind of checklist, even though you were FOMOing. For instance, I hear a lot about this project, but probably because they are from people that I really trust. Would you say you had that kind of checklist in your mind as well?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's not a conscious decision, but I feel like I've gotten to the point where I can look at, say, a project, the website and Twitter for literally 10 to 15 seconds, and I have a gut feeling about whether it's a good project or like a project that I'm going to be happy to mint or not. Obviously, there's infinite exceptions, and sometimes I'll miss things or make wrong decisions all the time. But for a good part, that gut instinct and reaction is fairly accurate, and it's based on a year of experience of looking at hundreds, maybe thousands of projects and just identifying, going almost through this, as you say, this mental checklist subconsciously, where I just notice and see whether the team is there and whether they've got LinkedIn and real photos or not, see whether there's roadmap, what the art's like, how much thought they put on the website and mid price and all that kind of stuff. It's just sort of take this snapshot. Yes, so sometimes I do that.
I feel like it's almost a crime to not ask you to be more specific about what this gut feeling is and how it looks like. Are there particular projects that you don't mind sharing in terms of how you analyze within 10, 15 seconds inside? It was great.
I can give you an example from last night, because last night I FOMOed into a project. It was Goblintown. So I think the website is Goblintown.wtf. Let me just double check. Sorry. Yeah, Goblintown.wtf. And I literally did buy into this based on 10 or 15 seconds. So Goblintown, it's a meme that's running in the crypto and NFT space when the market is bearish. I'm a big fan of memes carrying value and being powerful in life and in NFTs and stuff. So already that was good. The website, it's fun. It's got some good music. It's well made. The art is nice. It was a free mint, which I like, generally speaking. I actually didn't mint it. I bought secondary. One per wallet. They say they have no roadmap, no Discord, no utility. It's CC0, so the IP is anyone can do whatever they want with it, which I'm personally a fan of. I've written about a bunch. Other projects have done very well with that model. I think the art is fairly high quality and unique. It's not similar to most. It's not like a derivative project. It's not just a copycat of something else. Like, this is something unique that has had a bit of work put into it. And yeah, so based on literally 10, 15 seconds looking at the website, I decided, all right, I'm in. I want to get in. I think if this was a bull market as well, I think this would have taken off really well. Because it's a bearish market, it's a little more risky. So it was a free mint, and on secondary, I think they were at 0.02 or 0.03 when I found them. And yeah, I bought about 60 of them, and they went up to like 0.08 something, and now they're at like 0.06, 0.07. So like that one sort of paid off, worked out in terms of very, very short term. I haven't sold any, and I guess my general strategy with things like this is I don't necessarily want to make a 2x and just mint and then flip and then do all that. I'm happy to hold a bit longer and try and, if it goes to 5 or 10x, then I'll start selling a bit to cover costs and all that. But certainly like 8 months ago, 10 months ago, when I was actively trading a lot, this sort of thing would have been a regular night where I found a project like this. I minted a bunch, and then over the course of the next few hours, I started listing them to cover costs and make a bit of profit and build my bankroll up. And yeah, those like the thoughts that went through my mind with Goblintown.
I found it interesting that you said no roadmap and you were okay with that. But that seems to be a factor that most people would take to come. You need to show that you've put thought into it, a roadmap, before I decide whether to buy into it.
I'm the opposite in many ways. So my project, Zen Academy, there's no roadmap. I'm a fan of no roadmap ideas in general. I think that a well thought out, innovative roadmap that has a team behind it that can execute on it and sounds really great, that's almost priceless. That's fantastic. But I think 95, 99% of roadmaps are not like that. They're sort of copycats of other roadmaps. They're really low effort. There's nothing innovative. There's nothing mind-blowing or revolutionary. And to me, that is a really big strike against a project. If a project's roadmap is the same as we've seen everywhere, where they're saying, we're going to release a comic, we're going to airdrop companion NFTs, we're maybe going to have an ERC20 token, we're going to do some live event, we're going to put some money into a community treasury, we're going to donate to charity. That's great, of course, but it's nothing new. And partnerships, and we'll give mint list allocations, and that's below the bare minimum, I think, these days. We're going to do merch of what you can expect from a project. And so that, to me, A, says the team isn't innovative or like really doing anything revolutionary in the market. But B, the sort of the general issue that I have with roadmaps are that they sort of force a team to sort of do certain things because people have minted and bought a project based on a roadmap. So, and rightfully so, the team is obligated to fulfill that roadmap. And in our space, which moves so quickly and is constantly changing and evolving, I really think that the ability to remain flexible, agile, and change with the market, do new things, go, oh, okay, so we were thinking of doing a companion NFT drop, but that doesn't seem to be gonna, like, it's gonna add value, so maybe we're not gonna do that anymore. And just sort of adjusting to the market. Maybe you come up with a new idea 2 months after mint that you hadn't even thought of before, and you want to execute on that. So I think, yeah, it's just general under promise, over deliver type things. And also, with no roadmap, it kind of, in a way, allows the community to have more ownership and control over the project, because they can come together and decide what they want to do. And again, this is a larger discussion as well, but it's sort of like how much of a project is owned or run by the team, and what about the community? Obviously, the community owns the NFTs, but then the team launched them and has a vision and a treasury and executing certain things. So I guess I'm fairly bullish on communities, and it's trite and it's a buzzword, but I think community is really, really powerful. When there's no roadmap, when the IP is CC0, so anyone can do whatever they want with it, that to me unlocks the ability for a meme, basically an NFT meme, to really take off. And so we saw that with MFers, basically no roadmap, no real team. Satoshi is the person behind it, but he said there's no Discord, I'm not doing anything, it's just community owned. And that, again, back to Goblintown, that's sort of what appealed to me from that.
I found it very interesting we talk about CC0 because I'm an IP lawyer, so this kind of space really interests me. And for me, when I hear CC0, I just think, yeah, but does that mean that you don't really care about the commercialization of the IP? I mean, of course, there's a big benefit, which means that everyone can work on it and create their own variations. But that line becomes blurry in terms of how much effort we put in to qualify as being an IP. And then you can commercialize it and create your own merch, for instance, if you buy NFT. It really is quite difficult, I would say.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's fascinating, honestly. I love thinking about it and talking about it. And I think that I'm not an expert, certainly nowhere near as much as you, but in the little reading that I've done, it seemed like a lot of the stuff that was CC0 prior to NFTs and stuff was like educational content and material that no one wanted to commercialize, and they were free for everyone to learn. When it comes to NFTs and IP, when in many instances projects are thinking about like building a brand, telling a story, and having value in that. I love that different projects are experimenting with different models, so full commercial rights and then limited commercial rights and all that kind of stuff. I think it really does change the incentive structure, and more than anything, it unlocks freedom for creativity and freedom for creators to sort of take a base character or a base idea and do whatever they want with it. If they want to monetize and commercialize it, they can with whatever they've done to it. And if not, then they don't. And I think when it comes to the team that created it and decided to not withhold any licensing or rights and just say, all right, CC0, I think it's obviously a very conscious decision. And I think perhaps they're not in it for the money. Perhaps they just want to see this brand, this idea propagated around the world and see more people build upon it. And I think that also can sort of work where they themselves want to create sort of a vision, but they think that it will be beneficial if the community can do also whatever they want with it. So you have a main story and narrative that the team is working on and building, and then anyone else can do whatever. And for whatever reason, they think that, all right, so there will be value in, I guess, the original underlying assets. So again, sort of an example that I saw the Blitmap project use was King Arthur, Excalibur's sword. You know, imagine if that was an NFT. So it's CC0, anyone can tell a story with it. But owning that one, I mean, that's tremendous value. I think collectors and historians and everyone really would find that valuable. So I think, I don't know, really, really fascinating discussion about incentives and all of that. But I'm a fan of CC0. I don't think it's right for every project or maybe even most projects. And there's a lot of reason not to do it. But I think it's just cool and interesting. And it's like, I love when projects experiment with new ideas.
I mean, it's a very huge topic that we can easily spend 2-3 hours. So I wouldn't go there. But I hope that people, when they do use CC0, they do actually do the necessary research, because not all Creative Commons licenses are created equal, and there are different rights every single time. So I wanted to go back because you've been in that space for so long. Earlier, we talked about Cryptopunks, and that was one of the first projects that went really big and has become this status symbol identity. Because you've been in the space for so long, why is it so huge?
Yeah, so it really was the first NFT project that blew up and had sort of astronomical prices, I think, save for maybe a couple of early art pieces and rare things like that. But I would guess it was the first 10K PFP project. So like that's something that's everywhere now. Bored Apes and like thousands of projects since then have done 10K PFP projects. And I think that because they were first, there's value in being early, being the first. And they were so early. They were 2017. So, 4 years before the Bored Apes and years before most other projects like that. And as we've seen now, have sort of identified value in having a online PFP, whether it's personality, identity, to represent yourself online. And because they were so early, the CryptoPunks, there wasn't really much else out there. They just naturally became valuable and almost like a status symbol and a collector's item and merged into one. Also, the fact that those who were collecting them early in 2017, these were the most serious people in crypto by and large, and NFTs. Like no real casual retail anyone was minting CryptoPunks. I remember, obviously, I didn't mint them back then or even know about them, but I've heard people talk about how, so it was a free mint, you just had to pay gas, and gas was really cheap back then, but people still felt like it was wasting money. Like, why am I going to spend a couple of dollars in gas to mint a CryptoPunk? $5 per CryptoPunk? That's crazy. But some people had the foresight. Some people minted a bunch, and then some people bought them on secondary over the years, and they really became, a status symbol plus a representation of identity and a collectible and a collector's item. Like that, there's no two doubts about it that they're a collectible item. And they spawned so much in terms of innovation and ideas, and so much of the entire space is built by people who either still own or have owned CryptoPunks. And because they were early and they went on to build amazing things. Maybe it was almost like a proof of concept as well. Like the fact that CryptoPunks could take off and be so valuable unlocked this ability for everyone to go, okay, well, they've done it. It can work. People value collectibles and people value PFPs, and they were so OG that they really blew up.
And how does that differ from that craze around Bored Ape Yacht Cup?
When I got in, again, February, March 2021, CryptoPunks were already, I don't know what they were, 20, 30, 40 ETH floor. Very, very high. I'm sure most people were thinking, I'm too late. I wish I was around back then. Why didn't I get into the space? Even 6 months ago, I could buy for a couple of ETH, and everyone always, wishes they could go back in time and be earlier. When in reality, I think we're all still very, very early even today. But these CryptoPunks that were valued very highly, a lot of people wanted them, wished they had them, could not afford them. And then Bored Apes came along at a time when sort of more and more people were entering the market. And there were a lot of new market participants. For the most part, I think those who had been in crypto and found success since 2017, if they wanted to, they could afford a punk. They had the money in many respects. It's the new participants that could not and could not justify and could not fathom it. So then that's when new mints became sort of something that people gravitated towards as, all right, I can afford different mint prices. And I guess specifically with Bored Apes, so they minted at 0.08 ETH when ETH was, I don't know, 2-ish K maybe. And prior to that, maybe the month or two before that, the model for projects minting that had sort of become the status quo was these FOMO ramps, or what people called bonding curves, where the price basically went up the more that people minted. So it could be like the first you mint at 0.02, and the next 2K, 0.05, and the next 2K, 0.1. And basically it's just FOMO inducing. Like you want to get in early and early and early, and then for whatever reason, people decide they also still want to mint the last ones. It was made famous by the hash masks, because I believe the last hash mask was 100 ETH to mint for something that other people had minted for way less. And that was just crazy. Keyboard Monkey, I believe, is who bought that one way back then. He's a big trader in the space. And a lot of projects said, all right, this is a great idea. Let's do this model. Let's just mint out 10K and make the price go up as time goes on. And people, the market fairly quickly said, hey, we hate that. That's awful. Why is the same item cost double whether you mint 2600 one versus the 2400 one? Like, why is this just an artificial jump up in price? Why are the people who were there early, the insiders, getting beneficial treatment? So when Bored Apes released a flat pricing at 0.08, it was sort of at a time when not too many projects were doing it. So I think that appealed to people. But then, I guess it was this whole new community of people that sort of wanted a PFP and identity in the space, could now afford one. And it was almost, which is kind of ironic now, but it was almost this counterculture where punks were these elitist, this, high price thing that no one could really get into. They weren't really engaging in the community as much, save for a few. And then apes come along, low price, everyone can get in, everyone's having fun, doing what they want. The commercial rights element, I think, was huge, whereas with punks, owners didn't quite have the rights to create derivatives, and artists couldn't create derivatives with them. And then apes came along, and then all of a sudden, because there were a lot more artists in the space, they were creating fun derivative pieces and sharing those around on Twitter. And it was almost like a new generation of people came in and flocked to apes as just the new version of CryptoPunks, because CryptoPunks were unaffordable. It really just became this counterculture thing, which again is ironic now, because now people think of apes as elitist, and it's really funny, and there's validity to it for sure. But it's amazing how fast things change in the span of a year.
When I speak to crypto friends, a lot of them say this underdog mentality of people wanting to support underdogs. That's very much a part of the whole crypto community. And that's why people really
100%.
jump in.
100%. Yeah.
What is it like to actually be a part of the Bored Apes Yacht Club?
So I would say it's evolved over time. To begin with, I personally had a lot more fun because I was more active and involved in the community. As I mentioned before, I personally was more involved on Twitter than in the Discord, but it was just fun. I maybe had a few hundred followers on Twitter, but then I got a Bored Ape, and then I would just seek out and follow anyone who had a Bored Ape avatar, and they would follow me, and I'd see them in my timeline and chat with them and see what they were up to and what they were doing in the space and get to know them. And it was really this sort of almost instant community, and everyone was so welcoming. Everyone was warm. Everyone was like, by and large, friendly, happy to have you in the club. Most people who got in then were getting in at roughly the same price, and it wasn't astronomical. So it was fun, and it was just cool over the course of the next couple of months as well, seeing what different members were doing in the space, because of the full commercial rights. A bunch of people had ideas and started doing various things. Some people started selling coffee that was branded with their Bored Ape. Some people, Jenkins obviously started this amazing journey of storytelling and IP and licensing and following that. And then there were artists who just created derivatives. There was Ape DAO. There was someone who created like neon ape signs, and there's ape aesthetics, and there's a ton happening. It was just cool seeing sort of all this creativity unlocked and just being part of that and feeling part of that community. That's what it was like then. Now it's interesting because I think a lot of apes, especially the OG apes, have sort of gone on to create their own projects and do their own things, just get involved with many more communities. Like back then, by and large, there was one community, one or two. And now we're all in so many Discords. As you spend time in the space, you might buy more NFTs and be part of more collections and part of more communities, and your time gets a bit more split up. And so it's less focused and less centralized than it was then to just this one community, as well as, yeah, as I said, a lot of people have their own projects and are doing their own thing. So it's, I guess, a little less intimate. Also, it's grown in size in terms of holders, and especially if you include mutants and now other dudes and everything, it's a much larger community, but it still feels special. It feels nice to have been part of, or to be part of, something that has really captured the narrative of the space for so long. And certainly I would say now when big events happen, that's when I enjoy the space or like the community the most, because everyone is like buzzing and there's excitement. Everyone rallies around certain events. Like if Jimmy Fallon is showing off his ape and then people are having fun, or if when apes were being auctioned off at Sotheby's or Christie's, everyone was on Twitter and putting like suits on their apes and having fun like that. And obviously these in real life events, I've never been to any yet. NFT NYC, Ape Fest, there's going to be a bunch of ape events where your community can meet each other and have fun in real life. And it's certainly different and has evolved, but it's been by and large just a fun community to be a part of.
It sounds like the true value is that you can say, I'm a part of this elite, you can't get in club because it's sky high. It's like 95 ETH right now. But then at the same time, you have talked about the whole commercialization part, which is great, but any other project out there can also provide full rights to anyone else, and they could also rise. So I still struggle to see what the real value is, since normally you talked about community, and as you said, most of them have gone off to do their own project as well. And they're really busy, and you can't stay in 100 Discord communities. You can join them, but you can't be active in all of them. So would you say that maybe it's a little bit overhyped?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough to say. I think when you really start looking at almost any of these NFTs and what they're valued at, it all gets crazy and it all starts unraveling. I would say if apes are overvalued, probably everything is overvalued, which might be the case. Very much likely could be the case. It's really hard to say. They might be overhyped, but I would say part of the value, as you said, sort of like being able to say you're part of the Bored Ape Yacht Club, there's just inherent value in that because of how humans behave and think. I think I always go back to sort of the example of country clubs in the physical world. It's like people will pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, maybe more, to be part of a golf club or a country club, not because to play around a golf, like anyone can go play around a golf for $100 at any course, or even a good course, a few $100s. It's really just about the networking opportunities and to be part of this place where other people are paying that amount to be part of the space, or maybe you have to be sort of referred to get in or apply to get in. And it sort of like creates these communities of people that are really more serious, more successful, focused on building, et cetera, in life. That's just a proven model that has worked for forever, basically, in the traditional world. And now we're sort of seeing these clubs form in the digital world, and people are valuing them at various levels. And obviously Bored Apes are the highest valued one at the moment. And I think a large part of the valuation does come from that sort of exclusivity of being part of the club. And some tiny amount of it obviously comes from things like the in real life events and future NFTs that you get airdrop or claim for free. Then you think about, well, why are those valuable? And sort of starts to unravel a bit again there as well. But I think that's sort of where the value comes from. While a lot of us do have our own projects with thousands and thousands of people in the community, obviously it's a very diverse pool and everyone has different opinions. And just speaking personally, if someone has like a Bored Ape, I'm just personally going to be more willing just to hear them out and talk to them because I know that they're part of the same community as me and try and help them if I can. Obviously, the apes I disagree with, but yeah, I don't know. It's just crazy, the valuation. There's no doubt about that. But so are a lot of things in this life.
The valuation is so high, and you've said before it's hard to see the price of Bored Apes crash. What do you think it would take for it to actually crash, hypothetically?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, first of all, we have to define what a crash is because we've sort of seen a few times the price go down 40 to 60%, which is in most markets a crash, and it's pretty hefty. But I guess in NFTs and crypto, that's a little more common, and we see prices and like a true crash, I would say, is like 70, 80, 90%. It is difficult to imagine it going to zero, but obviously it's possible. It's hubris to think that apes are immune to a crash or like something catastrophic. I mean, a lot of people didn't think that they would, myself included, like flip punks and be a higher floor price. A lot of people didn't think punks would ever not be the number one PFP. So, who knows, in a year, maybe something new comes out that captures the attention of the next generation and they overtake it. That's one way that I think. It's also like, maybe the price won't crash per se, but maybe other projects will leapfrog and go even higher. And then in comparison, people will be like, oh, well, apes aren't number one anymore. They're sort of whatever. But I think in terms of an actual crash, it would need to be some sort of black swan event. So either some really awful regulation, litigation, SEC comes along and says, these are a security, you're an American company, blah, 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 blah. Really bad. Or a series of errors, series of mistakes that really annoy not just the larger community, but the ape community as well. And we sort of saw that for the first time, I think, with the other deeds drop. That was not what people were expecting from a company like Yuga Labs. Certainly, there was a lot of negativity towards them and apes as a result. And so I think if we see another several fumbles like that or issues like that, then people will very quickly, I think, start to lose trust in the whole ecosystem. And it sort of does bring up a slightly different conversation as well, because so there's Yuga Labs as the top, and then Bored Apes is one sort of entity, and then other deeds, the other side, Metaverse. While they're very much interrelated, they're separate entities, and it's quite possible that there's different teams running the two. And I think that even in interviews from the team of Yuga, they've mentioned about how going forward, Yuga is going to be so much more than Bored Apes. Bored Apes will be one part of it, obviously flagship key cornerstone part, but they're going to be doing many other things in the future. And hopefully it gets to the point where they're sort of relatively independent of each other. So maybe they experiment and have failed projects, but it doesn't necessarily reflect as poorly on the Bored Apes. And similarly, maybe projects aren't immediate smashing successes simply because they're from Yuga or associated with Bored Apes. People evaluate them more on the merits of the project itself and not just that association.
You said before that if Bored Apes hit the punk floor, then you would sell an ape buy a punk. But then you changed and you said, I'm more bullish about apes rather than punks. Yeah. Why is that? And is it still like that?
Yeah, it is still like that. I still have 3 apes and I had 0 punks. And for the longest time, my goal was to own a punk. I think a lot of people have like flip up to a punk. I mean, now I think a lot of people want to get an ape. So I thought it ever gets to the point, I'm so bullish on punks, I really want one. I'm going to, if that ever happens, which I don't think will, I will sell an ape and buy a punk. And then when it did happen, I didn't do that. And I think it was just sentiment shift. I think over the course of the last 6 to 10 months, I guess, Lava Labs, the company behind punks, sort of made several errors. Like we were just talking about with apes, what would it take for them to crash? A series of errors. I would say Lava Labs did that. If they basically just sat on their hands and didn't do anything, I think a lot of people would think that the value of punks would have remained really high or higher than apes and not faltered or crashed. But they sort of defended their IP sort of aggressively in ways that the community didn't necessarily love, or some of the community didn't love. They didn't have the most open commercial rights for holders to begin with. They communicated poorly in a couple of instances. They made a really big misstep with the V1 punks, where they sold some and then said they shouldn't have sold any, and just a series of mistakes by Lava Labs caused that to happen. So then when the floor did get to the point where apes were higher than punks, I just felt a lot more comfortable in the ape ecosystem than the punks. So I didn't want to just trade for the sake of it. I thought about what I wanted more, and it was apes for sure.
Apart from the Apes and the Cryptopunks ecosystem, you are very bullish about generative art. Why is that?
Yes, I would say more than anything in this space, generative art is what I'm most bullish on. And I found it relatively early. In the first month of minting, first few weeks, I was buying art blocks, generative art. I think it's just such a perfect use case of blockchain technology and NFT technology to merge with. So generative art as a medium, it's not new. It's been around since I think the 60s. And it's always been sort of using computers and machines and technology to create art in conjunction with an artist writing the code. But the way it has sort of worked, if someone ever wanted to sell their art, it was basically they would generate a lot of outputs, pick the ones that they like the most or that look the best, and then sell those as prints or pieces or whatever. With the introduction of blockchain technology and NFTs, it's allowed this merging of technology where now someone can not know what the art is going to look like before buying it and mint an NFT, a piece of generative art, where it's sort of part of the same collection. It's from this artist, from this collection, but you don't know exactly what the output's going to be. So there's this fun element, this randomness element where you get a unique piece of art and it is sort of etched into the blockchain. So there's provenance and then there's all the good stuff regularly comes from generative art. I think it's just fun and fascinating. As someone who only really started to appreciate art over the last 12 to 18 months, I mean, prior to that, I liked art and would visit a museum if I was traveling to a city, but I would never say I was an art collector or fan. I'm fascinated by just the technology behind it and the way that people create beautiful aesthetic outputs based on code. And I think that living in the digital age, it's a really novel use of creativity and ingenuity. And then you add the fact that, especially on Ethereum mainnet, let's say Artblocks, for example, the generative art lives more or less on chain. The Ethereum blockchain will exist, plus like a couple of other dependencies in some instances, but by and large, as long as the Ethereum blockchain exists, your art will be reproducible. So the code to reproduce your art is uploaded to the blockchain. And to me, that's really powerful. It's more historic and immutable than, say, a Bored Ape, where you mint a token, the NFT has like some metadata, and within the metadata, it points to a URL that has the image file. And if that URL goes down or where it's hosted goes down, you can lose access to it. No, I don't think that's going to happen either because there's pretty good decentralized solutions there, but it's not quite that same level of robustness as generative art that's basically stored on chain. And yeah, I mean, just watching how it has evolved over the last 12 months or so since I've been in the space and seeing people discover generative art similar to me, appreciate it, fall in love with it, enjoy it. I think we're honestly at the beginning of some sort of art revolution, whether it's specifically generative art or digital art as a whole. It's probably digital art, but I think generative art is a really important part of that. And I think that as time goes on, more and more people are going to see that. More and more people are going to want to collect generative art. To me, it is the pinnacle of NFT collecting.
I wonder, and this is from my perspective as an IP lawyer, in certain jurisdictions, copyright doesn't exist if the art, for instance, is not created by a human. And that's the beauty of generative art. So you could have copyright over the code, you could have copyright over the art. Is it not a concern that if you buy this particular NFT, the owner, the author could say, I give you all the rights to generative art, but actually there really isn't even any IP right behind it in the first place? Is it something that concerns people or is just not in discussion so far?
That's a really interesting point. I actually hadn't heard of or considered that angle, but I would say that by and large, those who buy or mint generative art aren't receiving the full commercial rights. Usually the artist is withholding a decent amount of rights. So you can display it for yourself, but you can't commercialize it. Or you can display it, you can use it for non-commercial purposes, but you have to reference the artist or like credit them. With Artblocks and with any other platform, the artist gets to decide what license that they have for the IP. It really varies. But I would say that, at least in my experience, those who understand generative art space at the moment, they aren't expecting to buy or mint a piece of generative art and then have full rights to be able to do what they want over it and commercialize it. It's very much similar to buying art in the traditional world. I can't go out and buy a Hearst and then start selling prints of it and make profit off that. It just doesn't quite work that way. And I think as a collector, I'm okay with it personally. It's very different, I think, when you're collecting art compared to a PFP project or a collectible project where there's more of a focus on the utility and what can I do with it and do I want to build a brand out of it? Whereas art, it's more about appreciating the art, the aesthetically having it on your wall, appreciating the code, the history, supporting the artist, being part of the culture and just, yeah, I think it's different, but I'm now keen to look into more sort of the IP behind what happens when the art isn't technically created by an artist. It's like code creates it at the point when someone buys it.
For instance, if it's proven that there is no copyright, then all these things about you only having certain limited rights, they don't exist because those rights only exist because you have the copyright in the first place.
Yeah.
So technically, you could do anything you want. It doesn't matter what kind of rules they put on you. But that's a whole separate discussion. That I think is
Well, I mean, yeah, as someone who's collected a lot, I guess happy with that. Honestly, anything that propagates generative art more and gets more people seeing it, to me, the value, if we're talking about like financial value, comes from holding the actual underlying asset. And that's something that no one can take away because it's etched into the blockchain at the time I'm in. Yeah.
I saw one tweet where you said that you managed to 100x your net worth in 1 year. Is there a secret to you doing that? I'm sure everyone wants to do it.
I'm sure they do. Luck is the crux of it. I mean, I think that there's no way anyone can do that without luck. I'd say it's come down a bit. Like at a certain point, it would have been 100x, but then obviously we're in a bear market right now and have been through a few cycles. So it's probably not quite at that level anymore. But yeah, luck is by and large the most important factor to it, being in the right place at the right time, being fortunate enough to mint the right things. But then I think conviction is another big part of it. So you can mint the right things, but then having the conviction to hold, it's like 100xing a portfolio or like 1000xing an individual asset. It's so difficult because it means that when you've 10x'd, you decide not to sell. When you've 35x'd, you decide not to sell. And it takes almost a special kind of crazy to do that, especially with something so nascent as NFTs, where the valuations is very difficult to understand and very speculative in nature. So
it makes me think of moonbirds as you were talking, how people were saying, should I hold, should I hold, should I hold?
Yeah, moonbirds. Yeah, I mean, I had never been more bullish on a project prior to mint than moonbirds. And anyway, what was I saying? The
conviction.
The conviction, yeah, that to me is the most important part. And it's really difficult to have because by nature, the space is so speculative and high risk and uncertain. But if you can find a way to have a really strong conviction in a project or a sector or an industry or movement or anything, and sort of invest into it early and be a part of it, and then hold on and just feel confident and not go crazy if things come crashing down, and sort of be able to take that sort of risk, that gamble, then I think that's really, really powerful. And just doing research and understanding like what people might want in the future and having a conviction that allows you to hold that really, I mean, I contribute most of the success to Artblocks. I think that's where I had that conviction fairly early and just started collecting and buying lots and lots and lots. And it, as a platform and most of the art there, went up tremendously. And then down a lot. I think it's come down 90% or 50 to 90% across the board in many collections. But I haven't panicked once. I've been continuing to buy because I still have that conviction in the long-term prospects of it. So yeah, I would say luck and conviction are the two key points. Yeah.
What about conviction in Moonbirds? You said earlier, I thought was very interesting. I've never been more, convicted. And I noticed you actually interviewed Kevin Rose before they launched Moonbirds. So what was it that allow you to be so certain that this would do well?
So it goes back to the Proof Collective, the Proof Pass that Kevin released, which one of my largest regrets in the space is not minting or buying in early and having a bunch of those, but that's another story. It's infinite regret in this space. However, the Proof Pass is 1,000 NFT collection for a private Discord that he put together for serious collectors in space. And it basically was a Dutch auction starting at 5 ETH that minted out at between 1 and 2 ETH and sort of hovered around that price for a while. And then a few months later, it was sitting at 40, 50, 60, 70 ETH around that point prior to Moonbird's mint. And so clearly already Kevin and his team had been able to create something of significant value that people valued and execute really well. And they had done a few things that they executed really well on. One was the Grails project, where they sort of gathered together some really, excellent 5-star S-tier artists in the space and put together a really innovative, a mint for their holders, provided a ton of value to them. And seeing how that they could execute on that, and also knowing Kevin and his history and background in like working in tech companies, and hearing him speak on his podcasts, Modern Finance and then Proof, I just had a really high level of conviction that Moonbirds was going to be just an really well executed project that a lot of people would want to be a part of. And so this was prior to really interviewing and chatting with him personally, but it was from listening to him sort of be on other interviews and talk about the project and his vision and how he saw things playing out. And it just seemed like he was, my biggest thing in this space is betting on people. I will bet on people more than anything else. If I'm looking at a project, whether to evaluate it, I look at the people, the team. That's true for Artblocks. I think Snowfro and the team he's put together is absolutely phenomenal. And then I think Bored Apes have executed really well on a lot of instances, especially innovative stuff where they were really leading the space in many respects where others weren't. And then Proof and Moonbirds again. So like Kevin was putting his name to it, he's putting all his time and effort into it, and I just could not imagine a world where this would not succeed or do very, very well, again, short of a black swan event. So all of that led up to me just being extraordinarily bullish on it prior to mint. And then I did buy several on secondary the day of mint. Obviously, hindsight 2020, I wish I bought more, but I'm very privileged and happy to have those that I do have. Yeah.
I wonder with Kevin, as you mentioned, he was in tech, he was doing DAYC, and this is the thing that I found when I was speaking to friends as well. They were saying that, and you mentioned as well, people in this space, they love the underdog and they want to go against the establishment. Kevin couldn't be more establishment. He's very much deep in the Silicon Valley space, and you could work as hard as you want. That doesn't mean your project will succeed. And I would have imagined because he was from the establishment, maybe with VC money behind it, that people might be wary. So why was that something that was a concern? How do you think about that?
I would say it was certainly a concern for some people, and it's a narrative that is running through the space. But I would say, and again, this is a larger discussion, but it's sort of, for better or worse, that ethos was a lot stronger a couple of years ago by the people who found crypto early, who believed in the fundamentals of it and are passionate about decentralization and underdog, like being the underdog and sort of battling against centralized entities, large centralized entities and VCs and stuff like that. As time has gone on and as more and more people are entering the space, and as sort of the level of technological savviness or just desire for independence and stuff like that goes down, I think basically as more retail investors join the space, I think that narrative is shifting and more people are sort of quote unquote being okay with VCs funding projects. And we have basically, by the time like Moonbirds came to launch, it had basically become de facto normal. Like everyone sort of knew that VCs were, again, for better or worse, involved in many respects. Yuga had raised a bunch of money, and so many of the protocols in the space are VC backed, OpenSea, and a bunch of others as well, of course. And so it's almost like, while yes, some people are not thrilled with the prospect of that, there are clear benefits as well. If you have a lot of funding to begin with, you can execute more quickly. If you have that experience, you know what it is to hire and build out a team and to just do things at a scale and speed that a lot of projects had not up until this point. I think that, I mean, not all VCs are created equal as well. I think that's the other thing. It really depends on who it is that's backing the project, what their incentives and goals are and timelines and timeframes are. Are they trying to extract and get a return on their money ASAP, or are they really very much long-term minded? And hearing Kevin talk about True Ventures, his VC fund that he's very heavily involved in, I know that he has spoken about how their approach is very much long-term minded. If they invest in a platform and protocol, I think they invested in Sushi, and I remember hearing him talk about it. He was like, we're okay with extremely long vesting periods and things like that because we believe in the protocol for 5, 10, 20 years. We want to help it grow and succeed and be a self-sustaining entity and provide guidance and support. And that's the other thing VCs can do as a network, and they can help stuff like that. So I'm not the biggest fan of VCs, but I think that they can provide value in certain instances in the right way. Hopefully in decades we're done with them and it's all decentralized and we have decentralized VCs. But until then,
I want to talk a bit about women founders in the NFT space. I've interviewed quite a few of them, and one of the common walls that they tend to say is that women-led projects tend to not take off. You look at Apes, it's gone up to 95. You don't see women anywhere near that at all. And I wonder why you think at least for you anyway, why you think that is the case. Why is it that women-led projects haven't taken off?
I think there's an important distinction to be made between women-led and ones where the NFTs themselves are women-focused and centric, because the CEO of Yuga, Nicole Muniz, is a woman. She's leading Yuga Labs. She's leading Bored Ape. She has been for a long time. So the most successful project is led by a woman. So I think a lot of people just forget that fact or ignore it or whatever, because the Bored Apes themselves don't have maybe a lot of traditionally female-centric traits, or maybe she is not publicly out there advocating for the project as a woman-led project or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, I think that there is a distinction between that and then projects like World of Women, where the NFTs themselves are women, and there's a focus on it being a woman-led project or a project for women. I do agree that there's sort of they just haven't quite found that level of success as, say, the Bored Apes or Doodles or Moonbirds now. And I mean, obviously it's a very complicated area and there's a lot of factors playing into it. I think one would be that up until now, the crypto space as a whole and NFT space catered towards men more than women. I mean, certainly even now. And so a lot of the participants who are buying and investing are still men, I think. I haven't checked recent numbers, but I think certainly up until, say, a year ago or 6 months ago, there were more men in the space. And I guess men are just traditionally more likely to buy an NFT that appeals to them or like that represents them more than anything else. So that might be one reason why they haven't taken off as much. Another one, I was talking to someone about this yesterday actually, is that because there's now this label of women-led project and they're sort of identified as that, it's almost as if they're competing against the other women-led projects. So people are like, oh, which women-led project is going to succeed? Is it going to be World of Women? Is it going to be Boss Beauties? Is it going to be Women and Weapons and Women Rise or whatever it might be? And it's sort of the focus is on that rather than the rest of the merits of the projects. And and again, it's sort of like they're competing against one another in that respect, which, yeah, I don't know. I mean, competition is good in many respects, but maybe the market doesn't have enough participants that want to invest in women-led projects yet. And that's obviously an issue, but I do think things are getting more progressive as time goes on and inclusive. And certainly now compared to when I first got in, there's a lot more thought and mindfulness going into when it comes to sort of what types of traits do you want for the project and what sort of like what would appeal to not just white men in their 30s, but, you know, all sorts of different backgrounds and yeah. So I think we're moving in the right direction, but we're not in a fantastic place, that's for sure.
One of the questions I get asked a lot by my crypto friends who are male is, how can men help females in the NFT space? I've never been able to come up with an answer. I wonder if you have any thoughts on it.
I think just generally being supportive and maybe going a little bit more out of your way to lift up and elevate, you know, women that are trying to create in this space or be in this space and provide value, especially if for whatever reason, like the market isn't viewing a project or there's not much of a spotlight on it, maybe because they're on it. Yeah. I think that just generally being supportive and spreading education is another big thing. And yeah, it's a tough question to answer for sure. Yeah. I mean, also just like voting with your wallet as well. Like that's one of the biggest things.
I think that's one of the common ways. They would just say, I will buy an NFT from their project, even though I don't expect it to ever go anywhere, but I'm buying it just to support the females. But at the same time, they would then say, but I don't know if I should have done that, because if I buy it, into a project that I know is going to fail, then isn't it better for me to let it fail rather than giving that small hope? I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think about it often for all sorts of projects, you know, not just specific to women-led projects, but there's unfortunately a lot of projects and founders I speak to and that I want to support their projects, but it really seems unlikely to me that they're going to succeed. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's so many unknowns and uncertainties in the space that you never know what's going to succeed and what's not. And often it's whether it's the straw that breaks the camel's back or some minor little thing that there's butterfly effect where just because you minting might be what makes someone else mint and what makes someone else mint, and they see that. And yeah, so I would say that I think if you want to support a project, a founder, creators, because you like them as people, you like their work, even if you think it's not going to be a financial success, I think that's still something we should all do. But I would say even more importantly, the best thing you can do for basically anyone, if you want to support them, is help spread awareness for their project and tell people, because at the end of the day, it's not that difficult to create an NFT project. It's getting easier as well with the tooling that we have. The difficult part is getting other people interested in that project because there's so much competition, and we live in an attention economy, and attention is stretched so thin in so many directions. If you can, write a Twitter thread or create a YouTube video or just tell a friend about a project that you think is really cool and just spread awareness, that I'm pretty sure is what any founder would say. They appreciate that support way more than, one mint at 0.08 or something like that.
So just before you go to the whole attention creator economy aspect, I wonder, I have noticed that there are a lot of quote unquote women in Web3 kind of events. I've not seen a male in Web3 kind of event. And I wonder if this sort of gender specific event is actually helpful, or is it more divisive?
Yeah, I mean, you're right that I haven't seen any men in Web3 events, and whether it's helpful or divisive, I don't know the answer. I think that maybe we will never know. It's one of those things where we'd have to look at an alternative reality where we see both play out and see what the results were. I think to me personally, it feels like a net positive. I think it might provide a space for women to feel more comfortable talking about Web3 and NFTs, or certain women who would be more comfortable talking in that space, not all, of course. And this is true of any group. Like, I think that, yeah, I mean, like it can be really difficult to sort of jump into the conversation and be part of it and feel part of the community if you're just not comfortable for whatever reasons. And if there's anything that would make you feel more comfortable, whether it's being part of a smaller group of like-minded people or a smaller group of people that you feel more comfortable with, like let's say you're a little bit older in your 50s, 60s, 70s, and you can't keep up with Twitter and you can't keep up with Discord, and then maybe there should be a Facebook group for people wanting to learn and chat with each other about it in a more calm, relaxed environment. Maybe it's about getting together at a cafe to meet up and talk NFTs rather than, and maybe that is I don't really see it as divisive, but more so I think it's additive rather than anything. It's like it increases options, so for certain people it'll be helpful as long as the narrative doesn't denigrate into like an us versus them, or that's we're going to support them but not this one. But as long as it's additive and supportive and helpful and done with positivity, I think it's only good things. Yeah,
I completely agree, and I often think that it never hurts to have more events and more opportunities for people to come in, because as we discussed way earlier, it's so difficult to get in. There are so many terms. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, just buying and transferring, and you can have many wallets. How do you create all those? It's very confusing. And it brings to mind a conversation I had recently with another guest called Eric Toda, and he's the global head of social marketing at Meta. And I asked him what his thoughts were on Web3, and he basically said the big issue is just access. It's just not accessible at all for the majority of people. We often forget most people don't even own a phone. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on just how do you make it more accessible?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. I think that is a bigger problem and issues. It's more like access to the internet and once, yeah. So it's not Web3 specific, but I do think that, even for those who do have access to a phone, most people access the internet via a phone or a mobile device and not a laptop. And so many apps and websites are native to like a desktop experience or a website, a computer browser experience, and not mobile friendly. So I think ensuring that we build tooling and infrastructure that is mobile friendly going forward is super important. Excuse me. I think, yeah, to me, obviously the logistics and the physical accessibility is probably the biggest hurdle for getting the entire world into Web3 and NFTs, and that's a much larger problem to sort of deal with and tackle. I think that Web3 will help that because it will free up capital, I think, in certain areas that can be directed in like a worldwide scale and allocated towards helping those less privileged and educating them. But I think education is probably the most important part about sort of onboarding newcomers to the space. And well, okay, maybe two things. One is education, and the other is infrastructure. In terms of like currently, it's very difficult for someone to get into NFTs and crypto and understanding how the blockchain works, how a wallet works, custody, seed phrases, gas, and all of that. It's just so foreign and difficult to understand. So I think figuring out ways to make that experience easier as well as figuring out ways to make whatever that experience is easier to understand. And I think those are the key things that are really going to propel Web3 mainstream in the next several years.
I want to check if you're okay with time, because I realize it's almost 2 hours and we haven't spoken about a whole bunch of
I'm
things.
good. I can keep going.
Okay. Are you okay with continuing? I think I love this conversation. I think we could go on for a
Yeah,
while.
me too. It's I can talk forever.
I have noticed you talk a lot all the time. I want to deal with that. So, okay, let's jump into that. So another aspect that I've noticed, I mean, you are known as an NFT thought leader, and you must be one of the most prolific content creators in the space. You have a newsletter, you have 2 podcasts, you have a YouTube, you have your own NFT project, Zen Academy. Me running just one podcast is so overwhelming, and I can't imagine you doing all of that. So I wonder how, I believe you first got into this whole content creation NFT space with a newsletter. How did that all start?
Yeah, it is overwhelming. Let me just say that as well for me as well. It's not. But anyway, so I started with with the newsletters where I began in I believe it was June 2021, June last year. And the reason, I mean, I've always enjoyed writing. I used to have a poker blog when I was back as a poker player, and then over the years I had ideas to create like a food blog because I like food and travel, and I just none of that ever really took off because it wasn't quite the right fit. But I've always had that like that proclivity towards writing and reading. So then, and as well, in addition to that, I've identified that I learn best when I write. If I have to explain a topic to someone, if I have to explain a project, then obviously you need to research it. You want to make 100% sure that you're getting accurate information across. And so taking that time to understand it and to be able to explain it and write it is what helps me learn. So I thought, let me start a newsletter to just start writing and about whatever topic or project, and I'll learn a lot in the process. And I never really had massive ambitions or goals or thoughts that it would really take off, but yeah, I just thought, let me just start and get it out there. And that's what I started with, and it started off going pretty well. Like, I think from the first couple of letters, it started sort of already starting to propagate and get a reasonable amount of readers and circulation because people were sharing it. And part of that surely was just basically there was very little NFT content when I was writing back then. So, and the space was fairly small, so people would just share it around, and that really helped. And then sometime after that, maybe within a month, actually, my friend Jamie, I mentioned before, so we both got into, we both bought Apes in May, and was kind of thinking like, well, we have these commercial rights. What can we do? What should we do? And we had both always kind of wanted to create a podcast at some point. And again, never was a great topic, and we didn't know, like, maybe he wanted to do it by himself, maybe I would do it. But then when this came up, we thought, well, maybe we create a podcast about the Bored Ape Yacht Club, or with our Bored Apes, or doing something in that vein. And then so we spitballed and came up with, so when we first had the idea, we didn't quite realize how much work went into it or anything like that. And it was still a case of we wanted to strike while the iron was hot. So we thought, well, everyone's talking about apes right now, we should just get our podcast out. And so I think it was a Thursday, and we started chatting. We're like, well, when do we want to release? We're like, Monday? Should we just get first episode? But I think it was about 6 weeks later that the first episode actually went out, and about 8 different test failed recordings and issues. And yeah, we had to find a sound engineer, and we had to get a logo and music and, all of that kind of stuff. And then figure out and equipment, and figure out how to actually speak on a podcast. But yeah, that's what came next. And that was, honestly, it's the most fun content I create, because it's just we're 2 friends and we're just talking NFTs and talking about what's going on in the space. And that's how it all began. And then it's just sort of exploded and kept evolving from there.
For someone who's listening to this interview and they really love what you are doing, and they want to hear more about, all your other thoughts on all your other different platforms, how do they begin? How do they decide which to start with? Because there's a lot out there.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And this is sort of highlighting a flaw in sort of my whole ecosystem, where I don't have a great starting off point. I sort of always direct people to my Twitter, because I think that's sort of like, it's got my stream of consciousness and sort of day-to-day thoughts. Plus you can find links to my other content and material. I have my link tree. And yeah, so my Twitter and Zen Academy as well, where I spend a good amount of my time and have people join. But for my content specifically, yeah, I'd say Twitter is sort of where I've set up home base. And then from there, you can sort of figure out what content appeals to you. Because something that sort of didn't dawn on me till way too late. So I was focusing so much on my newsletter, and which I love and I still love and hope to get back to writing more of. But it's basically that 70 to 80% of people don't read long form written content these days. They will not read an article that takes them 45 minutes to read. People want YouTube videos, they want podcasts, they want 60-second YouTube shorts, TikTok, Instagram, etc. So figuring out like how to reach a wider audience and share the same type of content but just in different formats is something I've spent the last several months working on. And so yeah, that's why. Yeah, so I mean, depending on what you like, I would say what I'm most proud of is my newsletter. I think like I'm proud of everything and I like it, but I think it just holds a special space in my heart. Like I put a lot of thought into my letters, and yeah, so I would say that if you have the time, I would recommend going there and reading some of the old letters. Some of them are a bit dated and were relevant to things happening at the time, but there's certainly certain ones that I think are relatively timeless and talk about more macro or big picture things. Yeah, so Twitter and then newsletter.
I felt like your newsletter was a way for me to understand what you care about most. For instance, you talked about generative art a lot, so I knew that was something you loved.
Yeah.
You talked about the Creative Commons a lot, so I knew that was something that you always cared. You care about a lot. You mentioned this thing called Zen Academy. What is it? How did it begin?
Yes. So for those watching the video right behind me, I've got my virtual background is Zen Academy themed. So the idea for this, I want to say June as well last year, but surely it couldn't have all happened at once. So let's say July last year.
Hugely creative period of life.
It was time is so weird in this space. But let's say July last year, I had the idea. Basically, I had been spending so much time flipping NFTs, trading aggressively. I was starting to feel a little burnt out, and like it was difficult to stay on top of my portfolio, having to sell things all the time, figuring out what to sell, and just getting a little less fun. It was still obviously very enjoyable, but yeah, just difficult to maintain. But I'll say even more than that, I felt that I wasn't contributing to the space or adding to the space by flipping. Like it's not a really rewarding thing to do aside from the financial upside. And that's something that I kind of struggled with as a poker player for 15 years. I never quite reconciled. The world does not need professional poker players. There's no real value being added to the world. We're not really helping. What we take money from those who are usually less fortunate financially or intellectually or psychologically or whatever it might be. And the dream case scenario is, okay, you are providing an avenue for wealthy businessmen who want to recreationally play poker to play and blow off some steam. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, there are people who have gambling issues and addictions, are just losing paychecks playing poker, and it's never felt good. But I had no other skills, and I sort of just struggled with it. I never really reconciled. But anyway, and I did other things in poker to try and add. But anyway, 15 years of that, and I didn't love the idea of doing more of that sort of like flipping extractive type thing in whatever space it was. But then I had started creating content. My newsletter and the podcast were starting to be popular, and people were like really appreciating it. They were enjoying it. They were feeling value from it. And that made me feel really, really good. That made me feel a lot better than basically anything else. Like, oh, I'm actually putting something out there that's adding value or providing help to people in the space, in the world. So I thought I want to lean more into that and do more into that. And so naturally I thought about my own NFT project, because I think that, in the Web3 space, you think about how you want to, whether it's monetize content or make a full-time career out of it. And, in the Web2 space, you could create like a Patreon, you could have a paid email subscription and all sorts of stuff like that, ads on YouTube, etc. But I wanted to do something Web3 native. And so that's where I had the idea to create Zen Academy. And the first iteration in my mind was it was going to be sort of like this one-stop shop where anyone new to NFTs could come and learn everything they needed to know to understand NFTs. And the reason was basically all of us then, and even now, we all have a friend or we have family members who come to us and they know that we are into NFTs, and they say, hey, you're into NFTs. Can you sort of help me? How do I get started? And there's no good answer. There still isn't there's a lot better answers now, but especially back then, it was like, all right, go watch these YouTube videos, read these articles, follow these people on Twitter, join these Discords, and then ask me questions. And then the first question is, what is Discord? And it's just really, really, a steep learning curve, and you have to hold their hands. So it's like, what if I could just make this website, this platform where everyone says, all right, go to Zen Academy, it'd be a history of NFTs you can read, how to set up MetaMask, what to look for. But then I realized how monumental of a task that really is, because of how much there is to learn and how just diverse and expansive NFTs are, let alone all of crypto and Web3, and you'd have to explain how a blockchain works and all of that kind of stuff. Not to mention trying to keep information current and up to date because of how fast things move. So then I sort of got overwhelmed and I said, well, actually, maybe I don't want to do this. It's going to be enormous. It's going to require so many more people. It's going to require funding and all this kind of stuff. And it was starting to make me a little stressed. So I said, I basically just put a pin in it and but I had already created a Discord server. I said, it would be cool to have my own community. I was in all these other communities, but it would be nice to have my own community to talk about what I'm up to and connect with people in that way. So for, I think, a couple of months, that was kind of the end of it. I had in my mind said, all right, I thought about Zen Academy and decided not to do it. And, let's move on and I'll just keep doing some flipping and focus more on my content just on a personal level and just leave it at that. But then in October, I had been planning to go to the US for NFT NYC, Apes, and there was an Artblocks event in Marfa. But due to COVID travel restrictions, I couldn't travel. I couldn't go. And so all of a sudden, like this 4 to 5 week period that I had sort of been hoping to be away for and traveling freed up and had nothing in my calendar. And so that's when I said, well, maybe now I should revisit Zen Academy and see maybe there's a different approach to take. And that's basically what happened. I sort of revamped the idea and said, instead of launching a full-fledged platform and academy and one-stop shop, let me just launch as community first, as this Discord server, a gated access Discord server where the token would give you access to the server, as well as what I was saying, lifetime access to Zen Academy. And at that time, Zen Academy was the Discord server. It was me being in there and that was it. But I knew that I would want to build more and do more in the space. I just didn't know exactly what and how. And again, this comes back to having no roadmap. It was like, I'm going to be around. I want to create content. I want to help people and spread education. And I want to make this my full-time job and not be flipping and trading and having to worry about doing that and do it in a Web3 native way. And there's certain things you can only do if you have a community that owns your NFT. For example, gating access to the Discord is one. Gating access to in real life events is another. Partnering with other projects where, they can see what NFTs you hold. Airdrops, we airdrop art to holders. Stuff like that is just made infinitely easier having an NFT. So that was sort of like the genesis story of how Zen Academy came to be. So that was October. And then, it was basically just a month, 6 weeks of building and figuring out how to do it and structure it. And then in early November, we launched as an NFT mint. And I actually structured it so that there were 2 different tiers of membership. One is the Genesis Zen Academy tier, and that's like your basic membership. And the other is the 333 Club, which is more targeted towards those who are builders or founders in the space who have their own project and are maybe looking for more advice or consulting, because I had been doing some consulting for a few months at this point. And basically, there were far more people wanting to bring me on as an advisor than I could realistically work with. So I thought, maybe if I create a community where I can dedicate more time to everyone in that community or some amount of time and be more active there, as well as hopefully have the community help each other and, share common knowledge and bounce ideas of one another. And that's what the 333 Club was and is. And so the 2 tiers of membership, the 333 Club mint price was 3.33 ETH. I have a thing for threes. That's just a number that was very in my mind last year. And so that was that. And then for the Genesis membership, I went with a mid price of 0.033 ETH. So I wanted to make it fairly accessible. I toyed with the idea of free mint and other options, but ended up with this. And I'm pretty happy with it. And we made it open.
There's only 7484 Genesis token. Why is that? That seems like a strange number.
Yeah. So the way we structured the mint was we said it's going to be an open edition. So for a 2-week period, anyone can come and mint however many they want. So there's no cap, there's no hard supply, there's no rush because gas was really high at the time. So we said, well, wait till gas is low. You have 2 weeks to mint. The contract was nice and optimized. So it only really cost, I think, $10 to mint however many you wanted at that time. And so, that's what ended up happening. We had 6,488 minted during that 1 week period or 2 week period. And then we reserved an extra 1,000 for giveaways, collaborations, partnerships. I think we've given away about 150 of those just because I really like the idea of a free mint, and I didn't love the idea of having a paywall for people to want to learn and be educated, but there are pros and cons to it. And I'll also say we have a free membership option as well, which is for the Discord server. Anyone can join and get a role that you can view all of the content. You can see the discussion, read the guides, watch videos and all that kind of stuff, but you just can't actively participate in talking and chatting because to avoid scammers and spammers as well, and you can't participate in like the giveaways for prizes and mintless spots to add value to the Genesis holders. But anyway, that's how we got to the number of 7488.
I just find it interesting because, I mean, obviously a lot of NFTs, you need to get it in order to join and be an active member. Most of them, you can actually join and just read it, but not be an active participant. But I've always thought that that's such a strange, almost anti-ethical way of doing things if your purpose is to be an educational platform, if you're meant to be the beginner's intro to crypto. But I can read. If I have questions, I can't even ask. And I can't even access these people. Probably these people are very well known on Twitter and they don't have their DMs open, or even if it's open, they probably wouldn't even see it. So how do you think about that? Because you said there were pros and cons.
Yeah, I think about it a lot. And we're sort of actively working on how we can bring more people into Zen Academy and help them. The next step is what we're going to basically, it doesn't solve a lot of that, but we're going to partner with other communities and projects. So let's say if you own a Curious Addies NFT, you can join and be verified in Zen Academy and participate and work with just as many communities as we can to get people. So if you have like one of 10 NFTs, you can talk. The other thing is we have a ticket option. So if you have a question, you can ask it and we'll answer. Like usually the questions are like specific to like, how do I join Zen Academy? Why would I join, or technical issues? But we not infrequently get people asking just general questions, and we do a good job of fielding those. And then we will soon be, so Curious Addies, the project I just mentioned, they've solved this problem. Basically, they've come up with this project or platform called Ember.help. Yeah. Where anyone can go and ask any question and someone will be there and reply to it within, I think 24 hours, but usually less. And so they've integrated in their server as like a bot. Anyone can type and answer a question. We're going to get that in the Zen Academy server soon, but you can just go to the website as well and ask a question. So we're going to promote that as well within Zen Academy and externally, because I think that's just such a great way to help the space.
Yeah, I love it. When I was speaking to mine, she's like, they basically gamified it and it just really took off in the space. That's why they created Ember.help.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. I was one of those lurkers on your Zen Academy because I wanted to do research. And I thought it was very interesting when you made an announcement saying, I don't want to be like any other NFT project. And you basically burned it to the ground, the way that you were doing things. Tell me what was going on at the time, what your thoughts were.
Yeah, so I think this would have been about 2 months ago now. Basically, so we launched in November, but the Discord had been around since I think August. And in the early days, there was this really sort of magical, strong community sense and vibe. And I had just sort of noticed that disappearing as time went on. We were sort of losing our soul. And I noticed it first, and I looked at sort of the metrics, the Discord insights, and like engagement was down. People weren't as active. People weren't checking the server as much. And I just kind of thought about why was this? And one of the reasons was we just had way too many channels. Like, we thought that maybe there should be just tons of channels and resources for people to go and learn and ask questions about any particular topic and read conversation. But it turned out to be, it was overwhelming for me and veterans, let alone for someone new to the space. So step one was burning it to the ground and getting rid of 99% of the channels and just really simplifying it. But step two was sort of, I had realized that I spent sort of like the first 2 or 3 months of this year looking at what other projects were doing and trying to sort of replicate their methods for success, or looking at more about seeing what other projects were providing and what I thought people wanted and providing it to them, like in terms of like more collaborations and mint list giveaways and like AMAs in the server with other projects and things like that. But I sort of realized, it dawned on me that we don't want to be like other projects. And what attracts people to Zen Academy, I think, is making it not like other projects. Another thing we were looking at is like alpha calls and getting out sophisticated bots with like analysis and tools. And again, that while they're great and extremely valuable for certain servers and people, it's not sort of very beginner friendly, and it sort of like splits the attention in too many areas. And so I thought about what did attract people to Zen Academy in the first place. And it was sort of like, it was me, my content, my sort of approach. And so I thought about, well, I can be more present and be more involved, and I can sort of try and bring in other content creators and other people into the team who have that same sort of values and ethos and can provide that sort of voice that's very Zen Academy and nothing else. And so, yeah, we went through this, period where we just stripped a ton of the servers, simplified things. I spent a lot more time, and engagement has sort of turned around, and I'm really, really feeling good about where we're at the moment.
Since you feel so good about where you are at the moment, what does success look like at Zen Academy?
That's a really good question. That's one that I ask people a lot. Success to me is what we are right now. Like, to me, it's to continue being what we are. So I'm always weary of kind of what did happen a few months ago, scaling and growing and like losing ourselves in the process. I just don't want that to happen. So I understand that there are going to be projects that come along that do what we're trying to do in many respects and do it way better. They're going to be bigger educational platforms, better for people to learn about NFTs, more structured courses and guides and everything. And, people will raise VC funds and they'll have bespoke websites and mobile apps and everything, which is fantastic. That's going to elevate the space. But I am wary of doing any of that if it's going to be at the cost of the community and the vibe and the ethos we have. And I'm a huge believer in taking things slow, work-life balance. So we try and take weekends off at Zen Academy, even in this crazy space. I'm a big believer in mental health and staying sane and supporting one another and all of that kind of stuff. So I think we have a few values and core ethos at Zen Academy, but two of them that I really like. I think our fundamental one is we make haste slowly. So we'll try and do things, but we'll take it at our own pace. And another one, which I saw recently as a tweet that I really loved, is direction is more important than speed. And so we're just figuring out the direction we're moving in, making small pivots and generally inching forward at a pace that we're happy with, and just continuing to try and do good things, help people, I think is really core. And anyone that's in our community, but also the wider community, and just be a place that people enjoy hanging out in and get some value out of. So yeah. And I think that we're, again, I feel really good with where we're at. So to me, we're already successful. And as long as we keep doing what we're doing and don't ruin ourselves or fumble the bag, which I'm trying hard not to, which it actually doesn't take that much work. It's very low stress, I would say. Yeah.
I would love to explore more of the concept of community by going to another conversation I had with another guest, Professor Robin Dunbar, who formulated Dunbar's number. And I mean, obviously, he's done lots of research into the whole relationship, how the people, how many friends can one person have at any one time, going all the way back to the Stone Age. And when I asked him about Web3, he was very, very firm, and he said that it's just impossible to build a proper relationship if you don't meet them in person, if you can't see the whites of the other person's eye. But the whole nature of Web3 is like you don't see them. You might even have avatars. You have an ape instead of a person. So I wonder what your thoughts are on just firstly building virtual friendships and relationships.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. I think the definition of what makes a real relationship is important, and I think also changing. So while I agree that it's impossible to have what most humans for the history of humanity would consider a real relationship, a real connection, it's impossible to have that without being physically with someone. And it is very different, the relationship you have being physically with someone than being online. Even people you talk to all the time, even if you voice chat, even if you video chat, even if you are in the metaverse, even if it's VR, it is very different than being in person. So I would agree with him that it's like, you can't replicate that. You can't. But I think that you can have something that is distinctly different, but perhaps equally as powerful, perhaps more powerful in certain respects in terms of friendship and connection. And I think that's sort of what we're seeing in terms of the community and the vibe. And sort of, I think for many people, there's a level of comfort that comes with the separation, the physical separation. And so, people feel more free to open up maybe and be more themselves, share more of themselves without fear of anything potentially happening in the physical world. And I think that it's just a different type of relationship, different type of community. And there's also, like, again, with the power of technology, you can do things digitally that you cannot do physically. Like you can meet more frequently because people are all around the world, or you can be in a gaming environment and be playing a video game together. You can yeah, I mean, one thing that I'm pretty sure doesn't exist yet, but I think will, is sort of like therapy in the digital world and in the metaverse. And I think that a lot of people have fear and anxiety of going to a therapist. And I think that bringing that into someone's home is going to be helpful and beneficial. And an example that I always draw on is that I'm very arachnophobic. I hate spiders. I cannot, but I want to not be arachnophobic, right? I want to get over it. And what's one of the best ways is immersion therapy. It's like, surrounding yourself with it. That terrifies me. I'm really anxious. I don't want to do that. But imagine if I could put on a VR headset and be in a virtual world therapist office space where there are now spiders crawling on me or around me. It looks like that. It feels like that. I'll be like, my mind will be split where I'll be terrified and like anxious, but I'll be able to say, I 100% know that I'm sitting on my couch at home. I'm safe. I'm comfortable, and I'll get used to it. So I think that just by nature of the digital world, there's things that are possible and relationships that are possible that will never be possible in the physical world. But similarly, as he said, you can't replicate what's possible in the physical world completely.
To build those relationships, you must first find these people. And as you said earlier, most people don't even know what Discord is. I mean, for me, I didn't even use Twitter before I started exploring what Web3 was. So how do you even begin to network and put yourself out there? Do you just start writing through the threads and just throwing it out there into the space and hope someone starts picking it up?
I would say asking questions is the best way. To me, that's just the best way of meeting people, getting to know people, getting people to know you. And especially if you're starting out, but honestly, wherever you are in your journey, by and large, people in the Web3 space, but also just, I think, in nature, want to help other people. And I feel appreciated if they're asked a question, because they're like, oh, this person thinks I have something of value to add to them. I'll take the time to respond and feel like I'm adding value back. So yes, join Discords, join Twitter, ask questions, follow people, ask questions for who you should follow, and just keep going from there. And I will say that so much of the space does revolve around Twitter and Discord at the moment, but as the space grows and opens up, we're starting to see distinct communities on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook groups, and traditional social media is also embracing NFTs and crypto more and more. And so you don't necessarily have to step out of your comfort zone and join Discord, but I would say that you are probably missing a lot if you don't, at least now.
You've said before that NFTs are inevitable, but that mainstream adoption would not be happening overnight. I wonder, when it does become mainstream, what does that future look like?
I think it looks like the technology will be abstracted away, and for the most part, most people will not even know or recognize or understand that they're interacting with NFTs on a day-to-day basis, and they probably won't even be called NFTs. They'll be called something else. We're already starting to see this. I think Instagram and maybe even Coinbase, they're calling them digital assets or digital goods, digital collectibles maybe. And I think, yeah, the vernacular will change. NFTs has a bit of a negative connotation right now, and I think that obviously the technology and the word for nomenclature there won't change, but like in the public's eyes, I think there'll be different words and it'll be abstracted away. I say that NFTs will go mainstream when my 97-year-old grandma and my 8-year-old niece can both interact with them in the same way that they can be using an iPad and playing a game, and it's that technology is so seamless and easy and second nature. We need to get to that point. It's going to take years and years and years, just like it did with computers and the internet and all that kind of stuff. But I really do believe it's inevitable, because I think it's inevitable that our lives are going to continue to be in the digital age and space. Like that, I don't think we're ever going back to pre-internet, pre-computers or anything. And I think that NFTs are just a clear value add and a layer of technological sophistication that allows for innovation that we have never seen before, that will make lives easier and just make the world a better place. That it is inevitable, but it's going to take time.
I wonder what your thoughts are, given that this is inevitable, but we are currently going through a bear market.
Bear markets are also inevitable, especially in a space as speculative and high risk and everything as crypto and NFTs. People are going to overextend themselves. People are going to speculate, and there's no real value. And it's also highly unregulated as well. So we'll see things like the Terra and Luna collapse, where top 10 coin goes to basically zero. And so when that happens, you get bearish markets and also, not to mention just the macroeconomic situation in the world is also not great right now, and that's felt in crypto. So bear markets are inevitable. I think that it'll like flush certain people out. Some people just came to make money and to flip. They probably kind of like me in 2016, 2017, where I didn't have that conviction. I didn't really understand the tech and see the future and the vision. So when the bear market hit, I left. And the true builders, they stayed, and the true believers stayed. They had conviction, and financially they were rewarded. Probably in other ways they were rewarded, and if they felt that they were contributing and feeling fulfilled and found careers and jobs that worked for them. And I think that the same will be true for any future bear markets in crypto and NFTs. Yeah.
And if you don't mind sharing, what does your crypto portfolio look like during this bear market, and how can people think about their own?
It hasn't changed a whole lot, and I don't do too much trading, but I try and consolidate as much of my portfolio as I can to what I call blue chips and the projects that I have the most conviction in and that I think are the most likely to be around years and years and years from now. Artblocks is number one by far to my holdings in terms of quantity and conviction and money and assets, and that's just, I have more conviction in that than anything else. Bought Apes assets and that whole ecosystem, Yuga ecosystem, it would have to be number two because I have a lot of conviction and faith in them, and I believe that they'll be around for a while, but less so than Artblocks by, I would say, a considerable margin. I think it's a lot more speculative. And then it's other PFP projects, Doodles, Moonbirds, and then just like almost like a smorgasbord of like small to medium tier projects that I think have potential, and maybe they make it or not, but I think if they're around in a few years, they'll or even a year, they'll do very, very well. And that's everything from PFP projects, membership tokens, gaming assets, art from one-on-one artists. Yeah, everything really.
Do you ever feel hesitant to share what you're interested in, what you're going to buy? Because I'm thinking, for instance, say Elon Musk, when he speaks, the market moves. And when you speak, a lot of people just follow you blindly. Does it worry you that people just jump in just based on what you throw out?
Yeah, I'm hyper cognizant about what I say, how I say it, when I say it, who I say it to. I think it's in a market so immature as the NFT market and crypto market. And by that, I mean like new and not financially enormous. Also, I guess socially immature. I think it's very easy and common for one person who has 200,000 or 300,000 Twitter followers tweet something and move the markets, and it's dangerous. And I think that people can get hurt by following you blindly. And obviously, there's manipulation that can take place, and there are bad actors out there. And so I'm really cognizant to try and act in a way that I think is ethical and upholds my personal morals. And that usually means like if I do talk about a project, these days I generally try only talk about projects that I'm positive about. I don't like to denigrate or like dunk on projects and say that they're bad, because you never know what the team's going through, what the founders, you don't know the full story, and maybe you're missing something. I would say the exception is if there's a clear scam, rug pull type thing, or there's a security issue that you need to alert people about. So that's one thing. And the other is if I talk about a project and positively, I just know that I don't have a hard rule, but I'm like, I'm not selling any NFTs related to that for quite a while, because I think that's like, I don't think it's bad to talk positively about projects that you're bullish on and that you really like, and to share that information. I think the danger comes if you're then actively selling while you're sharing that information. I think that's really unethical. The other thing is disclosure and disclosing my holdings, like as much as I can that is reasonable and feasible and makes sense. And the other thing is not front running. So if I plan to post about something, not the day before going and buying a bunch of those assets to get ahead of the curve, or if I have inside information because I talk to a lot of project founders and consult and advise, and I know that they're going to drop a huge announcement soon, not acting on it and also not sharing it with anyone else.
I recently found this out, that apparently anyone can drop an NFT into your wallet and you can't even block them. And apparently, I don't know if you're aware, some people were watching your wallet and they saw certain NFTs being dropped, and then they quickly mint, thinking, oh, surely it's something that it's quiet, but if Zeneca's going to mint it, it's big, and they realize it's not, it's a rug pull. So it just seems there's nothing you can do, right? There's nothing you can prevent, or it's not like you can put a warning around your wallet saying, don't follow everything. I'm going to put everything out there.
You're right. There's nothing you can do. The warning idea is actually interesting, because I could, like on OpenSea, put like in you have a bio where you could write something. So I'm actually, after you said that, that's actually a really good idea. Like, because people do it. They will watch my wallet, and see what's airdropped. And they can also sort of the scammers basically can make it look as if I minted it, and so people see, oh, it looks like Zeneca bought this, and then they just copy, like, again, FOMO, or they think I bought something, so it must be good, which is a terrible strategy. I don't recommend that to everyone, because my situation is very different and my strategy is very different. I might be buying something thinking I'm going to hold it for 5 years. I might be buying something with no expectation of profit. I might be buying something just to support someone, or because I like it, or whatever reason, who knows. So yeah, just copy trading in general is bad, but it's even more so bad because, yeah, like you said, anyone can drop anything, and then it looks like I minted or bought it, but it's actually a scam collection. There's nothing there. They're just gonna disappear with your money. Or worse, direct you to a website that's malicious and gonna drain your wallet or something like that. So yeah, don't ever mint something because you see anyone else mint it. If that does happen and you're interested or curious, just ask other people about it. Join the Discord. Open a ticket in Zen Academy. Just there will be ways to verify and communicate. But yeah, just it's a terrible strategy. But yeah, you're right that there's nothing anyone can do to stop others from sending NFTs to your wallet. By nature of how the blockchain works, they can just send whatever they want, and you can't refuse them. I had a call with one of my accountants yesterday, and I was talking him through that and telling him just how difficult it's been to do my taxes because of how many NFTs they are, and then how do you value those NFTs, and as an airdrop, do you have to pay tax on anything? And he was like, well, how many do you have? And I checked, I had 41,300 transactions.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an insane amount. I do not envy your accountant, and you're the kind of work.
I don't envy. Yeah, it's my least favorite part about Web3, dealing with accountants and lawyers, but it's necessary.
Well, I wouldn't take personal offense to that second part.
Yeah, I used to say my least favorite part about Web3 was accountants and lawyers, but I've changed it to say just the legal work and the accounting work, dealing with, that's the bad part. The accountants and lawyers themselves are wonderful people. It's just that the the work they make me do, that's less wonderful.
I completely understand. So, I mean, clearly you've done a lot of success. A lot of people are following you. How has that affected your happiness?
I would say I would be slightly happier now than I was maybe a year and a bit ago, but I would say it hasn't enormously shifted it from, say, this time last year. It's just like different life situation, different problems, different opportunities, different things to do and to deal with. And I think that by and large, I very strongly believe that, say, money or followers or anything external doesn't really impact happiness after a certain point. After you're sort of out of poverty, after you have your basic needs met, then I think you really have the ability to react, decide for yourself how you approach life, how you feel about whatever situation you're in. Because I think at the end of the day, it's out of our control to decide what situation we're in. Like, I am at a position right now where I've had a lot of financial success over the last year, and I've had a lot of, I guess, social success, and a lot of people are following me and all that kind of stuff. But it could disappear tomorrow. It could completely all go to zero. And there's infinite situations where I wouldn't have been in this situation. Maybe I made the wrong investments last year. I didn't buy board apps, didn't buy Artblocks, didn't go well. I went back to playing poker, and I think that being able to sort of find a way to be content with your life situation, regardless of outcomes, is really, really important. And I try to focus on that actively, I would say. But I definitely do feel a little happier now. Honestly, I think the biggest part would probably be that I've now doing something that I really love and that I feel exciting, interesting, new. I'm contributing to society. I feel like I'm good at it, all that kind of stuff. So whereas with poker, after 15 years, it was getting to be a bit of a grind, monotonous, and I wasn't as enthused by that.
Is there anything that people listening can help you with?
It's a wonderful question. I think just generally being kind and being nice and just like helping others. I think that's all I can ask for or want. I want others to help others. And I think that for the most part, people in this space do that and are really helpful. And I think just be kind and empathetic, I think.
Is there anything that you believe in that most people don't?
Oh, that's a really good question too. Well, I mean, that's interesting because then, I don't know what most people believe. I'm non-religious, but then I don't know if most people are religious, and so then I believe in etc. etc. Nothing wild. I don't think anything wild comes to mind. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Zeneca, for your time. I realize I've taken so much. I really appreciate how engaged you've been. I love to end all my interviews with the same question. So the first is this: do you feel like you have found your why?
Yes, 100%. So there's this Japanese concept, ikigai. It's this word, and I feel like I found that. It's yeah. That's again what I was alluding to before about finding. Yeah, it's. I feel eternally fortunate that I found it. Basically, yeah.
And what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
I would be happy knowing that I made one life easier or better. Like just, yeah.
And what do you think are the most important qualities of a successful person?
Patience, I think, is a big one, and empathy. I think empathy more than anything, and by that I mean the ability to see life and situations from the perspective of others. So I think personally and emotionally that is so helpful in terms of just being content as a human and helping others. But in terms of commercial success as well, understanding what people want and how you can help them achieve what they want. And often it might not be what you immediately think of, but yeah.
Speaking of one, is there anything in particular in the NFT space that you think would be great for people to build or solve?
There's a couple, but I know people are working on them. Let me see. I think we still need a really good NFT Wikipedia. Like that doesn't quite exist yet, and just like a go-to place like that. So, yeah.
And where can people go to connect with you, find out more about what you're doing?
Twitter. My Twitter account is probably the best. Although I should be directing people to YouTube and other places, but I'd say go to Twitter because from there you can find the Zen Academy and the 323 Club. You could find my YouTube channel. You can find my podcasts. You can find my newsletter. But Twitter is sort of home base. Yeah, it's at Zeneca _33.